The ocean has always played a part in who we are. It gives us food, provides transport routes, and shapes our cultures. The ocean is home to rich and fascinating marine life and is essential for the climate and weather. For African countries, the ocean is vital. With over 30,000 kilometers of coastline, the ocean supports coastal livelihoods, food security, economic growth, and employment. Everywhere, and especially in Africa, the ocean is under threat from climate change, pollution, overfishing, and more. But to restore and protect it, we need to better understand it. The Ocean Decade is a framework to create knowledge and solutions to the ocean's most pressing problems. The Ocean Decade Africa Roadmap is the result of multi-year, multi-partner efforts. It provides a vision and plan to move from the ocean we have to the ocean we want in Africa as part of the Ocean Decade. To make the Africa Roadmap a reality, we need champions who will lead the charge to tackle the most urgent needs. The Africa Roadmap identifies 9 priority actions. It recognizes that partnerships, skills, and resources are essential to implement these actions. We can only achieve its aims by working across generations, geographies, and genders. By bringing together ocean science, indigenous and local knowledge, and furthering innovation, the Africa Roadmap intends to build a more equitable, knowledge-based, sustainable, and prosperous future for Africa. Join us, and together we will make the Africa Roadmap a reality, creating the science we need for the ocean we want.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dependent on wherever you are joining us from. I would like to welcome you all to this webinar on Africa progress of the Ocean Decade in the region. My name is Edwin Mwashinga from IOC Africa here in Nairobi, and I'll just want to give you a brief of our program this afternoon. So to begin us off, we'll first have an update on the status of the implementation of the Africa Roadmap and the work of the Africa Ocean Decade Task Force from Dr. Hassan Mustafid, who is the Vice Chair of the Africa Ocean Decade Task Force. Then we will have a talk from Alison on more information about the call number 5 of Decade Actions. So we'll be able to understand how we can submit our Decade Actions towards that call and what it entails for submission of Decade Actions. Then we will have a panel discussion based on the 2 themes for the webinar that we have on the calls for the Decade Actions, that is marine pollution, Ocean Decade Challenge number 1 on marine pollution, and Ocean Decade Challenge 2 on ecosystem restoration. After that, we will allow for discussions, a session of questions and answers and discussion with the audience, with you. So I encourage you, if you have any question, any comment, please, you can just drop it in the chat box. And if you like to speak, use the hand raise tool that is provided to you so that we can give you the floor. After that, we will just have a way forward and also an introduction to the Ocean Decade Network by our colleague, Eman Nidham, and then we will close the webinar. So with that said, I'd like to welcome Dr. Hassan to start off with his presentation. Thank you. The floor is yours, Dr. Hassan.
Edwin, I don't have, yeah, it is disabled, the sharing. If you can enable that, I can start sharing my slides.
Okay.
Thank you. Or you can go, you can probably present it from your side and then again, just talk.
Let me just, you should be able to have it now. Are you?
All right, all right. Yep, yeah, I can see it. Thank you. Let me put the slides and thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for this session. I really enjoyed being here. Where is those slides? All right. Windows. Yep, I have it. All right. Do you see the slides now?
Yes, we can see them, but put them in presentation mode.
I will. Hold on one second. All right. One more. Okay. All right. Should work now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Go ahead.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Again, thank you very much, IUC, and thank you, IUC Africa. Thank the whole team for putting this together. My name is Hassan Mustafid. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I am the Vice Chair of the African Ocean Decade Task Force, and happy to be here. So I was asked to give a little bit an update on the task force as well as the Ocean Decade activities in Africa, and specifically the roadmap. First, before we go to the roadmap, I would like to give some update on the task force. Task force was established in October 2022 through a call for nomination, both individual and institutional, organizational. It is a multi-stakeholders body, including members from civil society, government, intergovernmental organization, private sector, multilateral institutions, and others. It has a membership of 14 individual members, and 6 institutional members from UN Environmental Program, Abidjan Convention, Nairobi Convention, NORAD, YOMSA, African Union Commission, and Africa Development Bank. I didn't put the name of the task force in this presentation. Well, I put them in the last slide, so if anyone is interested, I can show that slide at the end to see who are the member of this task force. The task force is led by the chair, Dr. Jacqueline Oko from Kenya, and 2 vice chairs, myself and Amal Shafa from Tunisia. And so the task force meets regularly to deliberate on the progress of implementation of the African Ocean Decade roadmap in the regions. And we had our first meeting just a few months ago in Nairobi. And that's what I'm going to present on, the result from that meeting. So to achieve its mandate, the task force will carry out the following roles: the communication and outreach, through undertaking continuous socializations, communication of the Ocean Decade in Africa and Africa roadmap with existing networks, institutions, experts, and stakeholders. So the task force has established the community of practice, what we call the COP-P, Group for Africa, and the Ocean Decade Network. The COP is an online space for decade actions to connect and collaborate. A detailed presentation on the Ocean Decade Network and the COPs will be done later during this webinar. Creating and building partnership by promoting multi-sector, multi-stakeholders engagement and outreach activities to engage further regional stakeholders outside the task force and raise awareness of the decade. Providing guidance and supporting support on the mobilization of financial and in-kind resources, and providing advice on measures and initiatives required to create the appropriate enabling environment for translating the Africa roadmap into a co-designed decade actions. And lastly, ensuring monitoring and evaluation of the Africa roadmap. The Ocean Decade Africa roadmap was launched in May 2022 at the Africa Conference for Priority Settings and Partnership Development. A framework document was published. The roadmap was developed through a highly consultative process, which include the Nairobi consultation workshops in January 30, 2020, the regional gap analysis in 2021, pre-conference workshop for Africa Conference on Priority Settings and Partnership Development in January 2022. So the roadmap provides a vision and plan for diverse stakeholders from the government, industry, philanthropy, UN agencies, civil society, and scientific community to convene around a common set of priorities for the implementation of the Ocean Decade in Africa. As you probably were watching the video, you probably heard about the 9 priorities that was established by in the roadmap. And those are the priorities that the task force is going to take on. The roadmap has clear links and synergies with other regional frameworks, such as African Union Agenda 2063, 2050 aims, 2019 Africa Blue Economy Strategy. So in Nairobi in April, the task force met in person. That's the first time. And the main outcome from that meeting was development of an Ocean Decade program for Africa. Well, setting the stage for that, not really developing it yet, but I think we are in the right track for that one. And we already gave a title for it, and a tentative, I will call it. It's a science and knowledge for resilient and sustainable ocean economy in Africa. Really very nicely, put together this title. It have all the pieces in there. The team will be working hard in the coming months on the development of this program. So stay tuned on that. The program will solicit regional projects along for different pillars. As you can see, those pillars are there. Sustainable. First one is sustainable management of marine resources. That's a big one. Climate change and marine biodiversity. A third one is tackling ocean pollution for enhanced human health. And that's a big problem in Africa. And the fourth one is extreme event and disaster risk reduction. Also one of priorities in Africa. It will be developed in details and submitted as a decade action for Africa specifically. So capacity development, technology and innovation, knowledge generation and dissemination, social literacy and financing. Mechanisms will be embedded in the projects as a cross-cutting enablers. As you can see, they are in the middle there. All right, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about, I think Alison, I guess she's going to go deep onto this one. So what I'm showing here is decentralized coordination structure that are tailored to the specific communities which they are serving. The first one is the decade coordination offices. So you have to coordinate this Ocean Decade, and this is really the way that they want to put it all together. because it have to have some structure on it. And this is the structure they come in. And then we're trying now to see where Africa, those offices are, and the committees. So the first one, as I said, is the DCOs, and that is as you can see, it is scoping for IOC Africa Secretariat. The Decade Collaborative Centers, center hosted by one of or more countries, or an international organization engaged in decade activities that catalyze decade actions at the regional or thematic level by providing technical, logistical, and financial support. DCC on Ocean Prediction, Mercator Ocean International, and DCC on Ocean Climate Nexus in China. The decade implementing partners, a known UN regional or international stakeholder organization that's set outside of the former governance and coordination structure, but that provide targeted support for the decade coordination units and decentralized coordination structure. Organization and institution can apply to the DIPs in NIOP, Egypt, and basically the NIOP Egypt is the DIP in Africa. National decade committees, NDCs, these are existing or new structures that coordinate actors at the national level. The NDCs are inclusive multi-agency and multi-stakeholders platform for the co-design and co-delivery of actions and facilitate access to benefits such as data, product, science, policy advice, or capacity development. Only 4 national decades committees are so far established in Africa, 1 in Angola, Cape Verde, Madagascar, and Nigeria. Call upon more member states to establish national decade committees. Moving on. This is an interesting slide. It's a lot of information in here. So let me summarize it a little bit. Globally, since 2021, there have been 4 closed calls for decade actions. Call number 5, that Alison is going to talk in deep on this one, was launched in April 2023, and is the focus of this, of course, of today. From the 4 calls, 47 programs, 235 projects, it's an interesting statistic, 79 contributions for 80 activities have been endorsed as decade actions. The decade actions are led by partners from 54 countries. There is a decade advisory board, DIP, which is composed of 15 members from 14 countries. DIP has held 5 meetings so far. Regional and national coordination, there are 7 regional task forces, 34 national decade committees, 11 decade implementing partners, and 9 decade collaborative center/decade coordination offices. Well, it's a lot of numbers in there, so I hope I summarize it a little bit, what you should know. So upcoming event, this is very interesting for you all. The one that is up. Yep. So the 2024 Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona, Spain, that will be held on the 10th, 12th April 2024. And so this will be an interesting event. So mark your calendar or block your calendar for that event. With that, thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions. This is the last slide. I said I put it it was in the middle, but I put it in the back. If you are interested to know about the task force members, this is the list. I'm not going to go over it, so you can probably glance, and if you need the slides, it will be shared at the end of this webinar. Thank you very much again.
So thank you very much, Hassan, for that informative presentation. And I think it gives us an overview of what is really happening in Africa concerning or related to the Ocean Decade. And I'll still want to ask our participants to put any question that they have on the Q&A section. And we will take these questions at during the discussion session with the audience. So please let's allow Alison to give us an information on the call. And then we have the panel discussion, and then we can have all these questions during the discussion session in the program. So I now welcome Alison to proceed with information
Great.
on the call.
Thank you so much,
Welcome,
Edwin. Let me just put this into presentation mode. Can you see the slides okay?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, lovely to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Alison Clausen. I'm based at the IOC Secretariat in Paris, and I'm the Deputy Coordinator of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And I work very, very closely with Edwin and Mika in the task force on the implementation of the Ocean Decade in Africa. The Ocean Decade is obviously a global movement, as you've heard, but Africa is a huge priority for the decade, not only because of the importance of the ocean to economic development, to human health and well-being, to the biodiversity and natural resources found in Africa, but because there's also a specific needs and opportunities and challenges for bringing African partners and African countries into the decade in a way in which they can play an active role. So we're very pleased that the task force is so committed and so motivated, and from the Global Secretariat point, really looking forward to continuing to work with them and colleagues in IOC Africa over the next few years to really make sure that the decade is a huge success and has a real lasting impact in Africa. So one of the ways that we do that is by getting some new decade actions invigorated and developed and submitted in Africa through the calls for decade actions. And that's obviously one of the key things we're here to talk about today. Before starting, I do just want to give you a reminder of some of the key elements of the way that the decade is structured. I think that's really important, so that if you're thinking about submitting decade actions, you understand how it fits into the overall architecture, the overall theory, and the overall impact of the Ocean Decade. So the decade is very much structured around the vision of the science we need for the ocean we want. It is about transformative ocean science, about transformative ocean knowledge, and really looking at solutions-based science and knowledge. So really ensuring that the user perspective is integrated into decisions about the way science is being designed, is integrated in the rollout of the science, and that the science that is coming out of the work that is being done is really being used by policymakers, by resource managers, by local communities, by local governments to really take action and make solutions. So the decade is structured around these 10 Ocean Decade challenges. The first 5 of those challenges, which you can see are in the light blue box, are really around some of the key themes that need to be addressed in terms of where there are gaps in ocean science and knowledge. So marine pollution, ecosystems, sustainable blue food, sustainable ocean economy, the ocean climate nexus. The next 3 challenges are more around the infrastructure that is needed either to carry out ocean science or to make ocean science accessible to local communities or to users. So community resilience, and that includes early warning systems, ocean observations, and digital ocean infrastructure. So that's related to ocean data, ocean information, the way we store, share, access knowledge. And then the last 2 challenges are really sort of the foundational or cross-cutting challenges of the decade. And the first of those is related to capacity development. And the second is a very broad challenge, which relates to a number of facets of work in terms of how you change behavior in relation to the ocean. So that can include ocean literacy, it can include art, it can include culture. We talk a lot about ensuring that all types of knowledge systems, including Indigenous and local knowledge, are included in the decade, and finding mechanisms and tools to make sure that happens. So essentially we have these 10 Ocean Decade challenges, and what we do every 6 months, so every 15th of April, And every 15th of October, we launch what we call a call for decade actions. And these calls for decade actions are the ways that we solicit the incredible initiatives, ideas from partners all around the world. And these decade actions can take the form of programs, projects, activities, and contributions. They're all different types of decade actions. And on the next slide, I'll define what those different categories look like. But basically, these decade actions are put forward by partners. They're submitted to the Decade Coordination Unit, and they have to really demonstrate how they're contributing to one or more of these Ocean Decade challenges. And they also need to demonstrate how they're aligning with the different endorsement criteria of the decade. So the decade is very focused on being inclusive. It's very focused on ensuring that early career ocean professionals have a real voice and a real say in the decade, ensuring that programs and projects are thinking about things like co-design, capacity development, ensuring that they're very solutions focused, that the data that they're producing is accessible. So we have a range of endorsement criteria that the decade actions, when they're being submitted, really need to demonstrate that they are fulfilling. So as I come to the next slide, this defines the types of decade actions that we solicit through all these different calls for decade actions. So first of all, we have the programs, and these are really the multi-year, multi-partner, multi-country, very large-scale programs. And you heard Hassan just presented on the idea for a new umbrella program in Africa on sustainable ocean management, and that would fit into this category. Of course, it's not the only program that is working in Africa or that will work in Africa. And so there's certainly scope for other programs working on different themes or working globally that can also work within Africa. Then sitting underneath the programs, we have the smaller scale projects. These are typically of, while programs need to be 4 or 5 years or even longer, projects can be smaller in terms of timescale, so maybe 2-3 years. They can be smaller in terms of geography, and they can be more focused on a particular theme. The programs really need to demonstrate how they work across all aspects of the ocean science value chain, from the identification of the scientific questions to the generation of scientific knowledge and to the use of that knowledge, whereas projects can sort of fit into just one piece of that ocean science value chain. So we have our programs and we have our projects. We then have contributions of resources, financial or in-kind resources, and then we have activities, which are more the one-off workshops, trainings, seminars, publications, but the more discrete and one-off type activities. And in fact, activities can be submitted at any time. So when we're talking about the calls for decade actions, we're talking more about the programs and the projects. So getting to call for decade actions number 5. So this was the call that was released on the 15th of April this year. It's the first of the 2 calls that will come out this year. And it is open until the 31st of August 2023. Now, this call is structured into 3 different pieces, or it's soliciting 3 different types of decade actions. First of all, it's soliciting programs. And so these are, as I was saying, the very large programs. The first type of programs that it is soliciting relates to Challenge 1 on marine pollution, with a focus on the sub-themes of plastic pollution and nutrient pollution. And the second challenge that this call is soliciting programs for is challenge number 2 on ecosystem restoration and management, with a focus on the sub-themes of area-based management tools, restoration, and multiple ocean stresses. Now, you may ask why only those 2 challenges, and some of the answers can be found on the left-hand side of this slide, which are the same figures that Hassan just presented. But essentially, we have 47 programs already operating in the decade, but we have gaps. We have gaps in terms of some of the challenges and certainly some of the sub-themes of those challenges. And so for every call for decade actions, we undertake a scoping exercise and we work out where the gaps are that we need to plug. And so for this particular call, we've identified gaps around these challenges and these particular sub-themes. And the next call it will change, but for this current call, those are the priority gaps that we are trying to fill. So that's at the program level. For this call for decade actions, we are also soliciting contributions for decentralized coordination structures. So these are the decade coordination offices and the decade collaborative centers. Hassan mentioned these. They are very important pieces of the overall coordination of the decade because they really help us translate the global ambition of the decade to a particular theme or to a particular region. And again, we're really lacking coordination structures that can help us pull together all the different decade actions working on marine pollution, on ecosystem restoration, and on sustainable blue food. And so we're looking for partners who can support decentralized coordination around these types of issues. And then finally, the third type of decade action that this call is soliciting are projects. So the way that we solicit projects is every time we're preparing a call, we go to our 47 programs and we ask them who would like to bring in new partners, who would like to bring in new projects through this call. And to the current call, 18 of the 47 programs are looking for new projects to come into the programs. And you can find that information, or I'll tell you in a minute where you can find that information, but it is a very, very diverse set of programs. And so if you're looking to submit something at the project level, it's almost certain you'll be able to find a program that could be relevant and aligned with what you are proposing. So in terms of steps to submit the call, the very first thing to do before you do anything else is to join the Ocean Decade Network, because it is the place where you actually submit the call, but it's also the place, submit your action, sorry, but it's also the place where you can find all the detailed information. And my colleague, Emma Needham, will give you some very, very practical guidance on how to join the Ocean Decade Network. But really, if you're not there already, it's the very first thing to do. Once you've done that, determine what type of action you would like to submit. Are you submitting a large-scale program? Are you submitting a smaller scale project? Is it really an activity that could be submitted at any time? A workshop, a training event, a publication? We find there is still a number of submissions that come to us that aren't quite in the right category, and it really saves a lot of time for you and for us if you can really think through the steps and look at some of the criteria about the types of decade actions. Sometimes it's not that easy to decide, in which case please contact us and ask us, and we can point you in the right direction, because again, the different types of actions have different forms, they require different levels of detail. So once you've logged on to or joined the network, read the call documentation, decided what type of decade action to submit, you reach out to us for more information, or if needed, and then there is an online form, or there are several online forms depending on what you're submitting, that need to be completed, in this case by the 31st of August. It's really important that you understand how your proposal, whether it be a program or a project, fits into the priorities of the Ocean Decade Africa Roadmap. And that is one of the questions that will be asked, and also how it creates synergies with other decade actions. If you are submitting a project, you really need to reach out to the program that you want to be aligned with to talk to them about how best you align and how best you fit their priorities. So that's a really important thing to do, and all the contact details for those programs are in the guidance note, which you can access through the Ocean Decade Network, which Emma will walk us through. For partners in small island developing states and least developing countries, we understand that sometimes additional support is required. I think it's important to say here that the Ocean Decade is not a financing mechanism. Getting endorsement as a decade action does not open up access directly to financing, because the decade is not established as a mechanism to finance projects. But once you are endorsed as a decade action, the decade can play a matchmaking role with funders. So it can introduce you to philanthropic organizations, it can help you connect to governments, it can help you connect to international financing institutions that are looking to fund programs and projects. And there is a lot of interest from our funding community for new programs and projects in Africa that align with the priorities of the Ocean Decade Africa Roadmap. So that is something that's very important to note, and happy to answer questions about that particular aspect. But one thing that we can do during the development of your proposal is help you find new partners, help you make networks, point you to resources that may help you prepare your submission in more detail. So please, if you feel like you do need extra support, do send an email to this email address, and we can have a conversation about what type of support we may be able to offer to help you make the best submission possible. Just, I know I'm running out of time, so I'll go through this one quite quickly, and just to say we will, of course, share the slides after the webinar, but some hints for a really strong submission: keep your answers succinct, really focus on the endorsement criteria, make sure you explain our co-design, how you've involved end users, how you've involved diverse stakeholders in the development of your project. As I said, if you're submitting a project, contact the program, make sure your partners are aware that they're part of the proposal, and then provide accurate information about the financing that you have available. It's very, very common that projects and programs are submitted without having all their financing, in some cases without having any financing. But if you give us good information on what financing you do have and what your needs are, then we can best help you to find new financing for your decade action. Just a reminder that the decade is, as you're submitting your decade actions, the decade actions are not just by scientists for scientists. They really should involve a diverse range of actors, governments, philanthropy, NGOs, industry. I mean, that really, really think very broadly about the types of partners that you can involve in your decade action. And have a look on the website, because there are a number of structures, decade committees, of course, the regional structures and other working groups that can help really identify individuals who may be interested in partnering or advising on your decade action. So that's something you can either find on the website or again through the Ocean Decade Network. And another reminder to ensure that the decade action that you're thinking about is really working, is using the Ocean Decade as a framework to work across the science policy interface. So thinking about how you're moving from science to the use of the data and information that is coming out of the decade action. So that's what I wanted to present on Call for Decade Actions number 5, but of course, very happy to answer questions. And I'm just going to repeat something that Hassan said, because we really want to get everybody excited and enthusiastic about the 2024 Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona. There will be some big announcements about this conference on World Oceans Day next week. This QR code will take you to a place where you can get your name on a mailing list to be first to hear about those announcements next week. We certainly want a lot of African participation in the conference. We're working very hard with partners to mobilize resources for travel support. So please have a look at the information as it comes out next week, and think about the engaging in the Ocean Decade Conference and potentially proposing side events, satellite events, and being with us for the conference itself. So I hope that was useful and of interest to those of you who are hoping to or looking to submit actions to Call for Decade Actions number 5. And of course, very happy to answer any questions when we get to that point in the webinar. And I'll hand back to you, Edwin.
Thank you so much, Alison. I think that gives us more clarity on how to submit our decade actions as African partners and stakeholders for the Ocean Decade. And I believe that going ahead now, we will put decade actions for this call number 5, because marine pollution and ecosystem restoration are actually challenges that really face the region. Now, going ahead, I will play a pre-recorded session, panel session, tackling on these 2 issues with regards to the call number 5, that is marine pollution and ecosystem restoration, where we'll have an intervention from experts within the region and showing us the criticality of marine pollution and ocean or marine restoration in terms of addressing or meeting the Ocean Decade outcomes in the continent. So this panel session was moderated by my colleague Harland, who will take over after I play this We will take over as a moderator after I play this video. Thank you.
Each expert on specific type of ocean is in Cape Town. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion, where we will discuss today one of the two topics of the current call for decade actions, solutions to ocean pollution. My name is Erlan Cerveau. I'm a member of the task force for the implementation of the Ocean Decade Roadmap in Africa, and I'm also the Chief Operating Officer of Ocean Hub Africa, a Pan-African business accelerator based in Cape Town and supporting the growth of blue entrepreneurs across the continent. It's a pleasure for me to be your moderator today for this session. And today we have the pleasure to have distinguished panel of experts joining us, each expert on specific type of ocean pollution. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. We have Dr. Hamza Shafai, expert in chemical pollution from the Sfax University in Tunisia. We have Mr. Chris White, waste management and circular economy expert and founding director of the African Circular Economy Network Foundation. And we have Dr. Edem Mahou, expert in nutrient pollution from the Department of Marine and Fisheries Sciences of the University of Ghana. Before we dive in, just quick words to give some context. Ocean pollution, I mean, most of the time in Africa, when we talk about ocean pollution, we think about plastic. But I'm very happy today that we will get to talk about different types of ocean pollutions that are affecting not only our ocean and marine ecosystems, but also our coastal communities. So today we will explore different types of ocean pollution, of course, plastic pollution, but also chemical and nutrient pollution. And I will open the discussion with a question specifically on that. And that question will be directed to Dr. Hamza Shafai and Dr. Mahou. As I said, when we speak in Africa about pollution, first thing that comes into our mind is plastic pollution. But you, as a specialist on chemical pollution, but also on nutrient pollution, can you explain what are the specific challenges associated to chemical and nutrient pollutants here in Africa and how they impact our marine ecosystems and our coastal communities? Maybe I will start by asking the question to Dr. Hamza Shafai first.
Thank you very much, Herland. I'm happy to be here and to join this team. As a member of the task force, I would like to bring my contribution in this topic. Coming back to your question, I consider that the big challenge is that the pollution problem is a very complex problem, and we cannot have a general approach for all the countries, all the African countries. I consider that each country has its own specificities, its own problems. So I think that each case needs to be addressed in a different way. Another big challenge is the level of awareness. For example, one of the topics I consider that is very important in pollution is the problem of endocrine disruptors and their effect on the reproduction and on marine communities. I'm not sure that many countries in Africa and even in other parts of the world are aware about the problem and the impact and the measurable effects of endocrine disruptors. So it's important to to raise awareness about the impact of these endocrine disruptors that can mimic the activity of endogenous hormones and that can affect populations by feminization, masculinization, and all the reproductive problems we can so this is one of the challenges that is coming. I think that it's important also to see what are the already existing best practices. I'm sure that in Africa, different countries, many experiences, many cases that could, if together we can address all the existing success stories or good practices, I think that it will be very interesting for the future. It will inspire. This is something that we need to share at the African level.
Definitely. One clear key point is that you raised is that, like, today, not a lot of people are aware of the impact that this type of pollutants has on our community, more specifically on the health issues. Talking about endocrine disruptors as an example. As an example. Yeah. Okay, cool. And in terms of nutrient pollution, Dr. Mahu, is there like something that you would like to raise that are today affecting our economy, our ecosystem, or the health of our communities? Maybe if you can start by giving example of what nutrient pollutants are, because I'm not sure that everyone is aware of it, and then to touch base on this.
Thank you very much, Helen. Indeed, population growth in Africa is very rapid, as we all are aware. And to be able to cope with this population growth means that we need to be able to feed a growing population. We need to clear more farmlands or clear more land to grow crops to be able to feed this population. Unfortunately, the rate at which our population is growing in Africa, we have not been able to put up measures that can help us manage some of the challenges that come with this increase in population that we are seeing. And hence, that is what has caught us in a lot of these challenges. And one of the key problems with population growth is waste. And like you said, we have different types of waste. We have plastics, we have the chemical waste, which are coming from industries. They are all, related to our increasing population, and we haven't had that been able to be at par with this increasing population as far as management of the challenges are concerned. And one of those challenges is our ability to be able to feed a growing population. So what is happening currently is that we have to farm to feed people. And we all know that these days there are so many uncertainties when it comes to agriculture. And so farmers are doing so many things to be able to build resilience, also increase the yield of crops. And that has led to an increase in the use of fertilizers on farms. It is these fertilizers that are enriching our oceans in the form of nutrients. It is not just on the farms, but also, I said one thing, that the increase in population comes with the production of waste. So we are generating a lot of organic waste that we have not been able to manage at source. And all these things are going into the environment. So currently, when you look at most of our water bodies, we are having this problem we call nutrient enrichment. The water bodies are becoming overly productive because we are clearing more land, which is making the land very bare. And so when it rains, it just washes all the agrochemicals, it's not just the nutrients, but also pesticides that are being used on farms into our water bodies. Now, what are the implications of these nutrients or fertilizers that we are using? In the aquatic ecosystem, we have plants. We have microscopic plants called algae. They need food to grow. And so as soon as we put these nutrients in the system, this aquatic or microscopic plants take advantage of the nutrients and they bloom in very huge numbers. And by blooming, a very short life cycle, so they die and then they all get back into the system and become organic matter. And that organic matter needs to be what? Broken down. We need oxygen. We need oxygen to do that. So basically what is happening is that the system is becoming enriched with nutrients, leading to more plant growth and resulting in water quality problems, which is affecting the health of marine ecosystems in West Africa. In fact, the coast of West Africa has been identified as one of the expanding areas that are experiencing increasing rates of hypoxia. Hypoxia simply means low dissolved oxygen. When we have low levels of oxygen in our water bodies, we call that hypoxia. So Africa is among one of those areas that is really experiencing this problem. Once the oxygen level is low, it has implications for fish, it has implications for biodiversity, and it has implications for the functioning of the ecosystem. So that is one of the challenges that has been associated with our increasing population. In our quest to feed more people, we are using more agrochemicals, we're using more nutrients, which are getting exported to the land.
I mean,
we have to find ways of addressing this challenge. Yeah.
And we are in a situation of a vicious circle, right? I mean, like we have a growing population to feed, and we use these fertilizers which destabilize the marine ecosystems, which kills our fish, which endanger food security again. So there is like, we need to find like a holistic way like to solve that challenge of feeding our growing population. I mean, thank you very much for that. It was very clear. It's good like to have issues. We talk about issues of chemical and nutrient pollution, but there is also like some solutions that are being built. Like Mr. White, maybe like you can give us like some example of groundbreaking solutions that you have encountered in your work to show that there is hope. I mean, when it comes to overcoming this type of challenges.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, obviously, I mean, the focus from my perspective on this talk is about marine plastics and the issues that they bring to the fore. The reality is that there are solutions to all of this, and it's based on economics. And when I talk about economics, I talk specifically about the circular economy. And we're constantly trying to fix the problem from the wrong end. So we're always looking at issues around infrastructure and service delivery, rather than looking at the solutions-based approach of trying to find value in those different products. And I've done many presentations around this in terms of understanding and unlocking the value in these different value chains. Technologically, the advancements are significant. Over the last decade or two, we have seen an amazing amount of work that's coming through, not only with regards to mechanical recycling, but also to other opportunities looking at pyrolysis, gasification, hydrolysis, thermolysis, enzymolysis. And there's a lot of different work that's been happening, but also getting into commercial applications. One of them specifically of interest to the marine environment, obviously, is the likes of ghost nets and nylon. And there are solutions for that. There is a 100% circular component where one can look at polyamide 6 as a complete chemical breakdown back into a new polymer, back into a new net, as a complete circular opportunity. So the opportunities are there and the technologies are there. So to try and give you one specifically, I think would be difficult. There are so many, but we need to work with all of them. And understanding that the linkages are all there. So, you know, I'm brought in as a marine plastic specialist, but understand I'm a circular economy specialist. So the solutions are there for all of these different issues. We talk about regenerative agriculture applications in terms of stopping the nutrient cycle. We talk of different chemical applications to stop heavy metals and oils and petroleum products getting into the environment and bring those back into useful application. wastewater management through either through runoff or through sewage is also a key opportunity for circular economy applications. And again, we've got to keep focusing on the economic opportunities around those. Some of the new technologies you refer to are in their sort of emergence stage and perhaps not mainstream and fully commercially viable, as is with any new technology. The more one implements it, the cheaper it becomes. If you look at solar panels as a prime example. But there are solutions to everything, but we need to start understanding the value chain. We need to start creating the value in that product, right through from whether or not we're looking at mechanical recycling opportunities or chemical recycling opportunities, but also to create systems whereby we can package these at a smaller level, particularly across Africa, where we can look at SME type development, that they become the managers and the operators of these systems and form part of that just transition.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I mean, and you were talking about circular economy, and Amel at the beginning was talking about collaboration as well. Obviously, what I hear from the three of you is collaboration is key. Collaborations between corporates, innovators, authorities, etc. Do you have any examples or of great collaboration, multi-stakeholders collaborations that have been successful to date, and what was or for it to be successful in the future, what would be the role of science in making sure that we have that holistic and multi-stakeholder approach to these challenges?
I would love to jump in on that one, because specifically we are looking right now at an STI-led approach towards a circular economy transition. It has to be a science, technology, innovation-based approach. It has to be. The opportunities in terms of looking at the collaboration are also there. So the ASIN Foundation is also part of the larger Our Blue Future, which is obviously a multi-stakeholder initiative for the Western Indian Ocean governance areas. And part of what we've done out of that is created a circular economy innovation team, which is more focused on project development. So as opposed to the stakeholder engagements, which are important, networking, communication, coordination are vitally important. There's a lot of good stuff that's going on, but a lot of it's happening in isolation. So these networks of networks are vitally important in terms of bringing that together. But ultimately, we can talk as long as we want. We can put in as many policies as we want. But if we don't have science and innovation bringing those solutions to the table, we're still going to be talking about it in 20 years' time.
Exactly. And I think this is what the UN Ocean Decade is standing for, and this is because in Africa there are also some specificities that we have that task force. I mean, anyone will share their aspiration on how STI could drive that multi-stakeholders collaboration, or also some examples.
If I take the case of Tunisia, for example, there are researchers doing very good research, even on topics how to depollute, how to reduce pollution, how to manage waste, and so on. There are professionals, there are also some stakeholders from the government, institutions, and even at the level of the Ministry of Higher Education, we have a system of the student entrepreneur in order to initiate entrepreneurship very early since the first year at the university. If you have an idea, even a crazy idea, you can go through different 3 steps to become an entrepreneur. But I consider that the problem is that is there any link between all these different initiatives? For example, in research, we have many research groups, laboratories, research units doing very good work, publishing in impacted reviews. But what is missing, I'm speaking about Tunisia, what is missing is the link, the implementation of mechanisms, allowing people to discuss with each other, to share their experiences. Sometimes you have the same topic, which is treated by one laboratory in the south and another laboratory in the north. Nearly the same problematic. So perhaps it's the case in other African countries, is to see if there are already existing mechanisms used in Europe, in America, in Asia, anywhere in the world, that could inspire African researchers, African stakeholders to implement efficient and sustainable systems in entrepreneurship, in management, waste management, and
as you know, like the purpose of that whole webinar is to scout for science-based and research-based solutions that can help advance ocean sustainability across Africa. Not only for the ocean ecosystem, but also for our people, because the two are intertwined, right? So I would like to ask you a question that I call the wish list question. So do you have like some examples of research-based, of science-based projects that are missing today that would help to advance your scope of work? What would come into your mind? Dr. Mao, would you like to take this one?
As a researcher, my wish is that whatever research we do, it doesn't just end up on the shelf, but it's implemented. And to get your research to be taken up and put into use, you need to work with people. You need to work with everybody that research affects. So, for example, we are talking about nutrients. We know that farmers play a role when it comes to nutrients, the impact of nutrients on the ocean. Farmers are contributing to this problem. So when I am designing a research, I have to design a research that incorporates these farmers. I need to know, first of all, why they are doing what they are doing. Secondly, is there a way that we can build their capacity or can enhance the work they are doing so they don't use all this adverse methods that they are using currently? It doesn't affect the ecosystem.
What I get from you is that like there is some need to have some behavior change type of work being done so that we leverage on social sciences to change the behavior and the mindset of the farmers, as well as like implementing like more tangible alternative solutions. Chris, do you have a wish list?
Very, very quickly, the key issue is that we are not linking research that is value added, that is linked to business, and that is linked to finance. We've got to get these things from ideation to implementation. And we need to do it in a manner, particularly from an Africanization perspective, where we're looking at small-scale applications that can structure and develop SMEs that support the just transition to a circular economy. And obviously that's in the benefit of all of Africans. That's my main point. That's my wish.
As a business accelerator, I could not agree more with that. so maybe we will take like the wish or wish list of Amel before wrapping up.
Yes, I just this reminds me the ocean literacy, which is a very big component in the ocean decade activities, and I was involved in different tasks. I consider that ocean literacy, as in a simple and pedagogical way, could be a vector to raise awareness, to educate, to suggest solution, and I think that this we can put inside ocean literacy messages, key messages that could serve what we are talking about: pollution, find solution. Say that one day perhaps we will not have fish in the sea because the reproduction is affected. We need to explain this in a very simple way and also very shocking, if needed, shocking way.
Okay. I mean, if I can sum up all your wish, so I hear a collaboration, I hear a sensitization and ocean literacy, and I hear behavior change, and I hear from research to solutions. And when we mean solutions, like bankable solutions with a clear customer or beneficiaries, like on the other side. I mean, like, that is very inspiring, and I mean, like, it's quite aligned with the work that we do in the task force. So the audience, like, if you have if you are involved in any project that are linked to that, like, don't hesitate to apply for the current call for decade actions, because as you see, like, your work is needed. So I will wrap up quickly by thanking our experts for their time and for their valuable insight, but most of all for the work that they are doing, because they, beside of being part of this panel session, like, they work every day to make sure that, like, we advance ocean sustainability for the ocean, but also for our population in Africa. And I really thank you for working tirelessly towards this purpose. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is George Maina. I am the Africa Fisheries Strategy Manager at the Nature Conservancy, or TNC. I am based in Mombasa, Kenya. Background about myself, I work as Fisheries Strategy Manager at the Nature Conservancy Africa Region Program. I also work on conservation and restoration of blue carbon ecosystems, especially because of the role they play in addressing climate change and in providing additional ecosystem services and livelihood benefits to people. Before I proceed, I would like to say a few words about the Nature Conservancy. So TNC follows a holistic approach to protect the land and waters, as well as transform the way natural resources are used and managed, and most importantly, inspire to equip others to contribute to the shared vision of a healthy, sustainable future for our Africa lands, oceans, wildlife, and people. And I'm happy that this event today aligns with what we do at TNC. We are very much a science-based organization, and we've also focused on on-the-ground solutions. And some of that I'll use the lessons from our work to share a bit more about what we can pick and what is relevant to the ecosystem degradation in Africa oceans. I would like to start by saying that our climate and our ocean are very much intrinsically linked. So today we are at crossroads in both the fight against climate change and our mission to ensure that the health and sustainability of our ocean in Africa is achieved. The importance of marine ecosystems to people and environment is nowadays increasingly becoming more clear over time, but we still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of ground that needs to be covered to ensure that these ecosystems are protected, they are restored, and they are better managed. Today, about 40% of people around the world live within 100 kilometers of the ocean. And 3/4 of the world's megacities are by sea. It is the same in Africa. What this means is more pressure, more demands for goods and services from the ocean. These ecosystems, marine and coastal ecosystems, are very important. You know, they matter to the world and to the people. Why? You may ask. They're very important in terms of climate mitigation. For example, blue carbon ecosystems, and this includes mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes. They store carbon at concentrations that are up to 4 times greater than terrestrial forest on per year basis. That's huge. But we also know that these ecosystems are superpowers when it comes to climate change. You've seen through those figures. they occupy less than 0.05% of the seabed, but account for up to 50 to 70% of the ocean's potential to function as a carbon sink. You can see they are very important when it comes to climate change mitigation. But we also know they protect us. They buffer coastlines. They help reduce erosion as well as flooding. When it comes to biodiversity, I cannot say much. They provide safe habitats for fish and other marine organisms, as well as enhance biodiversity within the ocean and the coastal areas. But most importantly, they provide community benefits. They support livelihoods, food security, and public safety during severe weather. So these ocean ecosystems are very, very important. And although they may appear small, they are mighty. That's what I can say. However, we know there are challenges. They are facing challenges. And these challenges are not restricted to Africa region, but these are also global challenges. Global challenges that require local solutions, regional solutions, as well as global efforts. We know the major drivers of loss and degradation of these ecosystems are largely overexploitation, for reasons I have explained earlier. There's a lot of conversion pressure happening, large-scale developments, tourism, infrastructure, all these converting these ecosystems into other uses. We also know due to the growth, population growth, pollution is also happening and is being directed to these ecosystems. And as I said earlier, climate change is also contributing to degradation of these ecosystems. What this means, if this is not averted, if these problems are not addressed, we will continue losing these ecosystems. Scaling up conservation and restoration of these losses have never been more critical than it is now. In terms of actions, we know there are multiple players, including community-led efforts, that are being put in place to ensure that we, as African community or global community, are reversing the degradation of these critical ecosystems around our oceans. We know science plays a key role. Local ecological knowledge is important. As different partners or stakeholders, we have different strengths. And it is very important that we have concerted approach in terms of addressing these threats. The call for action is all of us, all organizations involved, to join hands and ensure that we are working to take advantage of the different strengths within different institutions, and therefore ensure that we are having more impactful results. Most importantly is to ensure that we are empowering coastal communities. We are engaging with indigenous people and local communities as regional leaders when it comes to environmental stewardships, to ensure that they are benefiting from these ecosystems and that communities are on the forefront when it comes to driving interventions, simply because they are living within these ecosystems and they are depending on these ecosystems. The second recommendation is that very important to ensure that we are connecting with national, regional, and global policy efforts, and that we are bringing together Africa region community so that we can amplify best practices while leveraging on our strengths in terms of policy opportunities. This way, we will be able to accelerate conservation and restoration at scale, above and beyond isolated initiatives within organizations, within countries, within economic blocks, but at Africa regional level. The third point is that we know all this requires resources, and I mean financial resources. So it's also important that we devise approaches in which we can ensure there is sustainable financing mechanisms to fund ecosystem restoration. For example, it is important that as Africa region, we come up with strategies that develop financial climate solutions that can fund ecosystem restoration around our oceans. And this we should do building on the scientific foundation while leveraging policy and financial mechanisms that we have within our region. And this way, we will maximize the power of our ecosystems as a natural climate solution. I would like to share one example, and this is which has a very good opportunity for scaling up regional partnerships, and not only regional but global partnerships. And this is in terms of forums that exist that can help us in terms of sharing and learning within the Africa region. And a case in point here is Global Mangrove Alliance, or GMA. So the GMA, or Global Mangrove Alliance, the strategy is to catalyze priorities and actions through a very highly coordinated multi-sector and multi-scale approach with the 4 core areas of innovative finance, knowledge sharing, capacity strengthening, developing proof of concepts, and also ensuring that we have good policy. So at the heart of the GMA, I would like to say is that it is to build a movement of members beyond the founding organizations, a movement of members with complementary knowledge and expertise. And by connecting isolated activities within the Africa region, by connecting isolated initiatives of members and other partners, then we are able to bring concerted efforts together and be able to accelerate conservation impact at scale above and beyond the capacity of a single organization, a single country into Africa region. And this is a classical example, which as the Africa region, we can be able to ensure that our ocean ecosystems are restored and their integrity is maintained.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope we've followed through the recorded session. And I'll now want to invite my colleague Harland to progress with the rest of the session in terms of discussion and question and answer session. Harland?
Yes, I'm here. Hi. Hello, everyone. I can't put my camera on. I don't know if it needs to be allowed. Just quick, I know we're lagging behind schedule. Edwin, how long do we have for the Q&A session?
I think 10 minutes is okay.
10 minutes is fine. Okay, cool. I mean, like I've seen there's quite a few questions regarding the session. I mean, that is fine, but I think most importantly, there is questions regarding like the process of applying for the call for decade action. So if it's fine, maybe we will tackle that before. And there is a specific question, and I think maybe I can ask Alison to reply to this one. It's more related about like, well, I will read the question, it will be easier so that there's no missing words in translation. If you have a project that could be relevant to the Ocean Decade, but does not directly address the current call for decade actions, should you wait to submit until the relevant call open? And the second question, if a call on a specific challenge has closed, will that topic challenge be revisited in a future call?
Great, very good question. So I'll answer the second one first because it's easier. Yes, so we, for example, challenge number 2, this is the second time we're addressing challenge number 2. It's also the second time we're addressing challenge number 1. So that's one of the reasons why we have 2 calls per year, because it means we can regularly bring back some of the same themes and challenges so that we're getting new ideas and new initiatives all the time. In terms of the first question, it really depends if it is a program or a project. If it's a large scale, multi-year, multi-partner, multi-country program, while we have those specific themes, there is another option for you to contact us to discuss other ideas, and you can see that laid out in the guidance note. But that's really for the really big, urgent, multi-year programs that cannot wait, that really have to be done now. So you can read about that in the guidance note and see how to do that. At the project level, you really need to wait until there is a program that aligns with what you want to submit. But in saying that, in this call, we have 18 programs. In the last call, I think we had 26 programs. They are extremely diverse. And it's pretty rare that we've heard of people who have great project ideas, who want to submit to a program and can't find somewhere to fit in. Really, if that happens, contact us and we might be able to help guide you somewhere where it could happen, or guide you to partners where we could find a spot for you. But you really need to, as a project, you really need to find the program alignment that makes the most sense.
Alison, don't go too fast. You'll have a question for you. There is questions regarding what is the role of the Ocean Decade to make sure that his full commitment and involvement of states in Africa, and also with the African Union and also development partners. Would you like to give some insights on that?
Great question. Okay, so first of all, the task force, I think, is a really important forum for many of these organizations to come together. So the African Union sits on the task force, the African Development Bank sits on the task force, certainly some of our UN partners, regional seas conventions and so on, also sit in the task force. So that's the sort of the organ where we bring together many of those regional partners. Then from the Decade Coordination Unit, we are in constant contact with member states as well, whether they be African or non-African member states. For example, in 2 weeks, we have our IOC Assembly. There'll be a number of agenda items where the decade is addressed, where issues around the decade in Africa are addressed. And so that's a way of us communicating with member states about the decade in Africa. And then we have the Ocean Decade Alliance, which is a group of eminent heads of state, government partners, ministers who have come together in a group of around 20 representatives at the moment to really help raise the profile of ocean science, to raise the profile of the Ocean Decade. And there we have a number of African partners who are involved in that. So Seychelles is a member of the Alliance. Kenya is a member of the Alliance. I'm very happy to pre-announce that Cabo Verde is a member of the Alliance as well. So we do have African heads of state and governments in the Ocean Decade Alliance, and we'll certainly be looking to involve them in the and have them present and speaking out both for Africa and for the Ocean Decade at the Barcelona conference, for example.
Thank you, Alison. I mean, there are questions. There are some questions about to the panelists, but I think like it's very strange because some participants replied to the questions already. So people ask questions and participants replied already. And there is something that was raised, and maybe I can answer. So someone raised the challenge of having African waters polluted by other countries. And if there is like any solutions currently that are being developed to make sure that we develop this type, that we avoid this type of IUU activities in African waters. What I can say that is yes. We ourselves, as a business accelerator, working with an innovators like who has developed an artificial intelligence to detect a risk of IUU activities. But these type of innovators, if they don't have that broader ecosystem that, for instance, the Ocean Decade is bringing to the table, is very hard for them all alone to tackle this type of challenge that is affecting the whole continent. So innovations are moving. Now today we need to, and this was also key in the panel discussion that we have now today, we need to make sure that these innovators and these solutions, they are surrounded with the right stakeholders around to make sure that their solutions benefit ocean sustainability. I mean, there was a question about the effect of plastic on marine habitats and on marine species. And I know that he's George Mayna from the Nature Conservancy, who's here today. George, would you like to give like a crash course on how bad the plastic pollution is on our ecosystem? George, are you here? Yeah. Cool.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Plastic problem is a huge issue on the marine environment, and I know maybe some of you may have heard that in a number of years to come, when you go to the ocean, you might not find, chances are, instead of fishing and getting fish, you might fish for and get plastics. So it's that big. So and we know in the ocean there are areas that are actually sinks within specific regions that receive plastics, or plastics accumulate in these areas, and they are taken from different regions and taken to specific areas. So some regions are suffering more than others in terms of plastics. So this is a huge issue. And again, it requires to be addressed from the source, be it from the private sector side, but most importantly, policies are also needed. We know some countries have taken proactive measures and they have banned use of plastics. And this is something that needs to be scaled up into different countries in Africa, so that we can ensure that the source of pollution of plastics is addressed. And again, if it ends in the ocean, then it's have many impacts in terms of affecting our food systems in these blue waters. So it's a big issue, and it requires to be addressed not only through policy, but also through science, so that we can better understand the source and its movement, and the impact on the food chain, and the actions that needs to be done. So more actions are needed.
Thank you very much, George. I think I see lots of questions pops up, but I think we're running a bit out of time. There is like a last presentation that is scheduled in this call, Edwin, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe we will move forward with the agenda, and I invite the panelists to reply to the questions in the chat if they can. Edwin, is that fine?
There's a question that Mika wanted to answer.
Okay, cool. Mika, the floor is yours.
Mika, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. The question was from Uganda regarding the African Ocean Decade and getting activities created as part of the African Ocean Decade. Maybe I make a clarification. One, we have the African Decade, the Decade of African Oceans and Seas, which is spearheaded by the African Union Commission. And then we have the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which is spearheaded by the Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and is what we are discussing now. Regarding the African Decade of Oceans and Seas, I think the best people to contact on this would be the African Union Commission. I could give you a contact. You could send me an email and I'd send you a contact at the AUC for the African Decade. Then for the Decade of the UN Ocean Decade, I think already Alison has given a lot of information on how to get projects, programs, and other actions endorsed as part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So I just want to clarify the difference between the two. There's a Decade of African Oceans and Seas, spearheaded by the African Union Commission, and the UN Ocean Decade, spearheaded by the Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mika. Perhaps
So,
is there
Edwin,
Hassan, please go ahead.
Yeah, son, I just want to pick up on one interesting question by Olusola at UA. I think it have 3 parts on it, and it seems like directed to IOC, UNESCO, Africa. And I think we can probably slice that in. There is 3 questions in there. The last one seems like very interesting, and it said, what specific actions can IOC Africa take to unite Africa environmental NGOs to take part in the decade call? And so for me, first probably question I will reply back is, do they want to be united to send one call? But I think most of them are part of other groups, and they are engaged in different with different groups, and maybe part of task force as well. I think that question may be better answered by Alison and Mika as well. If you can take on that one, would be great. Thank you.
I can try and take that on. So the question, sorry, it was cutting out a little bit there. I've got some noise outside. So the question was about NGOs in Africa engaging in the Ocean Decade?
Correct. I mean, the question was, Alison, is to unite them. And my question to the gentleman, I mean, whoever posed that question, is they want to be united first before we unite them. But anyway, I think the point is that, how we can get them engaged and to really get into be part of the decade call.
Yep. No, it's a great question. So I think there are different ways this can happen. So first of all, by establishing partnerships either between NGOs or with academic research institutions, with industry, with other partners to put together decade actions. I myself worked for a very long time in an NGO, directing an NGO in Madagascar, and I know how much excellent science is happening within NGOs in Africa. I think it's a really strong piece of scientific knowledge and research that is not currently really tapped into the Ocean Decade, and we would love to see more African NGOs either collectively or individually really contributing the scientific work they're doing to the decade ecosystem. So that's a key thing, to really think about where their work aligns with the Ocean Decade challenges and putting in Ocean Decade or proposals for Ocean Decade projects or programs. The other thing is, and this is still a work in progress, but in the lead up to Barcelona, we are looking to put together an Ocean Decade NGO task force, because we've recognized that NGOs have not been as engaged in the decade as other types of institutions. We've got great industry engagement, philanthropy, of course, scientific community, government, but NGOs, and again, with all the valuable work that they bring to the scientific landscape, have not been that involved. And we need to understand why. We need to understand why we're not, what information are we not providing to make it attractive or interesting for NGOs, and then develop a strategy and an action plan basically to get more NGOs involved. So if there are African NGOs on the call who would like to sit on a task force and help us think through some of these questions, certainly the aim would be to have some sort of side event or event around the Barcelona conference related to NGO engagement in the decade. Please contact us and let us know, because we're actively, in fact, I've got a call next week to actively try and identify new members or members for this new task force, and it would be great to have some representation of African NGOs. So I'll put the email address in the chat again, but do reach out if you're a representative of an NGO and would be interested in helping us think through some of these questions about how really to make it interesting and impactful for NGOs to engage in the decade.
Thank you, Alison. I see Amel has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Edwin.
I don't know. I cannot put the camera. No problem.
Please go ahead and give your intervention.
Okay, so just to regarding the question of what is the ocean decade doing concerning pollution mapping? The question of pollution mapping. I think that this is a very important point because we cannot have an idea, a clear idea about the pollution state of the marine environment without making the mapping of pollution. And this is possible if we use some plans that already exist in the monitoring programs, in the evolution, les courbes de tendance, that means of the temporal evolution of pollution. So I consider that from scientific point of view, we have a lot of literature about that issue. And I pick the question of Promise Nawashtuko. She or he is asking about that issue. So I consider that we need to take note about that point, and perhaps that the task force will be catalyzing some initiatives, bringing some guidelines about mapping pollution tools, how we can proceed, and so on. That was just a comment. And for other questions, I already answered directly in the chat space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I asked panelists, please, you can check on the questions on the Q&A section, and please type in your questions because of time, type in your answers because of time. Now I want to invite my colleague Emma to give us a presentation on the Ocean Decade Network and how we can be able to interact in that platform as African stakeholders for the decade. Emma, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Great, hopefully you can see that now and hear me okay. So yes, I very much for having me here. So my name is Emma Needham. I am the Ocean Decade Network Manager, and I work within the Decade Coordination Unit with Alison. And I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to be a part of this meeting and give a brief introduction into some useful tools to engage with the decade. And these are the Ocean Decade Network and the community of practice that we recently created for Africa. So my role involves managing the Ocean Decade Network and also being the focal point within the Decade Coordination Unit for our decentralized coordination structures. So we mentioned these earlier on in the meeting, but these are our Decade Coordination Offices, our Decade Collaborative Centers, and our Decade Implementing Partners. So I'll start off by giving a brief introduction into what the Ocean Decade Network is. So it is an online platform, and it's really the main space to actively engage with the decade. So it's a place where you can connect with people across a really wide range of ocean expertise, from people working in policy, scientists, students, NGOs, artists, journalists. It's very inclusive to anyone who wants to get involved. And the content is user-driven, like many social media platforms that you will be familiar with. So the network is a place where you can network with our nearly 7,000 users, both by using our public feeds. So we have this live feed section here where anyone can post and share information. And then we also have our groups over here. So these are sort of smaller, more targeted groups for information sharing within different topics and different regions. We also have the directory, which contains a profile for every single one of those 7,000 users and information about what they do and how to get in contact with them. And you're able to filter those people based on where they're based or keywords. So it's a really great way to find other people who are working on similar things or working in an area that you want to target. You can also use these sections to share events and opportunities. You can view all of our decade actions that have been endorsed so far. So each of them have a sort of information page. You can also, as Alison mentioned earlier as well, a very important part of the network is the Take Action section, which is where you can apply to become an endorsed decade action. So there's a lot of information on that page, and would definitely recommend taking a look when you're on there. So yeah, if you haven't already, I would really recommend joining the network. So the place to visit is forum.oceandecade.org, and you can fill in the sign-up form. And when you're filling in that sign-up form, just make sure to, if you're involved with an endorsed decade action, make sure you just click next to it to say that you are, and fill out the name and number, an ID number of the endorsed decade action that you're involved with. And that will really accelerate the approval process for you to join the Africa Community of Practice and any other communities of practice that you request to join. And I'll explain a bit more about what those are in a second. And yeah, once you're on the network, so you will, after you've filled in the sign-up form, you'll receive an approval email with an activation link that you'll just need to click to confirm your profile. But once you're on the network, I would really recommend visiting the resources section first, because that has some great information about how to best use the network and how to sort of get yourself set up on there. So my next slide is just about a brief introduction into what communities of practice are. So these are a space for members of endorsed decade actions within a certain theme or topic to share ideas, to connect and collaborate. And the aim is to have a community of practice for each of the 10 decade challenges and each of the ocean basins. And of course, more focused topics and regions where there is a need and interest in having this coordinating structure in place, as is this community of practice that's recently been created. And all of these communities of practice have a virtual space on the Ocean Decade Network. So this is what the Africa Community of Practice looks like. And communities of practice are a type of group, and so you will find them by going to, once you're on the network, you'll go to groups, then regional communities of practice, and find Africa COP. And the group is like a mini version of the network, really. So many of the same functions as in the overall structure of the network. So yeah, on there you can make announcements to group members and share information. You can create events that are specific to this group, or that where you'd like people from this group to be able to join. There's the forum if you want to discuss specific topics, and there's a media center as well where you can share and upload documents that you would like everybody to be able to see. So these are closed private groups, and they are closed to anybody who is involved in an endorsed decade action. So once you've found the group, you'll need to click request to join, and you'll be prompted to include both the name and identification number for the decade action that you're involved with, so that your group administrator can easily check that and admit you to the group. So yeah, that's essentially all I wanted to say. So yeah, here are my contact details if you have any other questions, or of course I'm very happy to take any questions now if we have time. But yeah, Ocean Decade Network at unesco.org is my contact, or the sign-up form is forum.oceandecade.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma, for that wonderful presentation and on the Ocean Decade Network. And I want to appeal to all of us as participants to join and participate in the forum as African endorsed decade actions, because there is where we can share our experiences and knowledge and collaborate in one way or another with the aim of advancing the implementation of the decade in the region. So there is one question that I want to pose to Alison. It's on the chat, and I hope you can answer it. It says, how does the Ocean Decade protect these ideas? Say it's someone's innovation and they are submitting it for visibility and maybe to attract funding. So in terms of protection of people's ideas.
I mean, whatever you submit to us remains your idea, remains your thing, remains your initiative and your project. So what it means is that your idea has a sort of stamp of approval that it is contributing to the Ocean Decade. So we hope that it's actually something that adds value to your idea, to your initiative, but there's certainly, certainly everything remains yours. We do, when we get initiatives or ideas that come from private sector or that come from NGOs or privately funded partners, we do have to undertake due diligence. So we do need to do that because it's a UNESCO requirement. So we may have to come back to you and ask you some questions about some of the commercial aspects of what you're doing, if there's if there's a commercial aspect to it. But very much the idea is that the decade is helping you to raise visibility and raise awareness about what you're doing for your idea, but certainly not aiming to take the idea or take any sort of claim any sort of ownership over that idea. So I hope that answered the question.
I hope it did. Thanks. Now to end this webinar, I'll invite Mika to give his closing remarks, and also invite Hassan to give his closing remarks. So Mika, please go ahead and give the closing remarks for the webinar.
Thank you very much, Edwin, for giving me this opportunity to give some remarks. I'd like to start by thanking all of you for joining us for this webinar. We are hoping to have this as a regular feature of our planning for the decade in the region, looking at different topics, and especially when calls for action are released, looking at how Africa can engage. One of our biggest concerns has been that there have been very few responses from Africa for the previous calls for action. Up to now, not a single large program led by an African-based organization has been endorsed for the decade. And this is something that we really should reflect on. How do we develop a major program for Africa as part of the decade? And even if you look at the projects, very few projects led by African organizations have been endorsed. So we'd really like to encourage all of you to make an effort to develop projects and programs that can be endorsed as part of the decade. We see the decade as being an opportunity for us to really drive ocean sciences in Africa, to really drive ocean innovation in Africa. So we should especially explore ways that we can be able to do this. Within the Secretariat and within the task force, we are looking at the possibility of having an African-focused call for decade actions, and looking at how we can engage partners who might be able to support some of the projects or programs led by African entities that have been endorsed. But to be able to make this argument, we need to have programs initiated from Africa. So as to convince partners that there's something that they can put their money on. And that's why we are encouraging all of you to be able to make an effort to develop initiatives. We are available at the Secretariat to support you in developing projects, in developing programs. If you have any idea that you feel that you need support in developing, just get in touch with us, either Edwin or me, and we'll see how we can assist you in developing the program. Once again, thank you all, and we look forward to working with you in ensuring that the decade is a success in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mika. This is Hassan. Again, well, I cannot say more than what Mika said. This is a huge opportunity in front of all of you. And I probably will be brief here, that let's get into the action. Let's put those projects and programs forward. You have great people to help you. I mean, look at how many times Alison repeated the same thing. Here's my email, send me. They are open hand for all of you. At some point, I think in this webinar, we had about 120 people. I mean, huge really turnout. I think we can see a lot of potential, a lot of energy out there. From different levels, from professionals to early career scientists to postdoc. I saw a lot of questions about from postdocs or students, and that's great. This is exactly what this all actions is trying to achieve, is to get this some project and programs within Africa that has been missing the boat for a while now. I think this is our time to move forward and get those actions out. There will be some program, maybe an umbrella within Africa that is probably program like what Mika said. But again, what make that program great is those projects behind it that are funded projects. I think the team is here. I cannot say this great team out there, IUC Africa, really ready to help you. There is IUC team ready to help you. Please put those things in forward, and we are here to help you. That's all I can say. I think this is the great opportunity we have within this decade. So let's move forward and address those big challenges that we all face. If you go to the beach, you are not going to see anymore those bottles out there and those pollution. So let's clean that up. Thank you.
All right. I think it's my turn, right? So yeah, what else can I add? Like, thank you first and foremost to the IOC and the UN Ocean Decade Secretariat for giving us that platform. I mean, you enable African stakeholders to get access to other international and also continental partners that they might not have access to without the power of the organization. So thank you for that. And once again, I will say basically the same thing as Hassan and Mika. When I joined the task force, it was with the ambition of doing my part when it comes to making sure that we get more and more evidence-based solutions that help us with ocean sustainability. But for that, we need collaboration. We need champions, and we've seen today when I've been through the list of attendees that there's lots of people with lots of great ideas or lots of great projects that are already being implemented. And I really encourage you to apply to this action decade, because we won't be able to implement this roadmap that is essential for the life of our communities, for the future of our children. We won't be able to achieve this roadmap without collective intelligence, if I can say. And what I've seen today is that the continent is full of bright minds with the heart placed at the right place. And I really encourage you to apply and to collaborate to make sure that we reach our objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That marks the end of our webinar. Should you have any questions or issues that you would like to address, please feel free to reach to us, and we'll be ready to respond to your questions and comments. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day, evening, or afternoon. Thank you.